So let's start with the first case. This was a 74-year-old female who presented with the complaints of lump in the left gluteal region for 10 years, gradual increase in size over time with rapid increase since 2 months, exacerbation of pain since 2 months. There was no history of trauma, fever, or difficulty in walking or squatting, no history of dyspnea, chest pain, cough, hemoptysis, and gastrourinary symptoms. This is the clinical photograph showing the swelling in the gluteal region. That was the only finding in this patient. Examination showed a 15 into 15 centimeter lump in the left gluteal region, which was extending from the posterior superior iliac spine to the sacrum posteriorly, from the iliac crust to ischial tuberosity inferiorly. There were diffuse borders. It has a variable consistency. It was solid at some places, it was cystic at some, and it was pulsatile. The tumor was fixed to the iliac bone. Overlying skin was stretched and shiny, and there were no ulcerations. In the digital rectal examination, it was a fixed extramural mass on the left lateral size, pushing the rectal wall and rectum to the right. There were no other palpable lump. So what is your clinical diagnosis? Now you can unmute your mic and
Sir, it can be bony mates either from the RCC or from the follicular carcinoma of thyroid.
Acha, why?
क्योंकि because sir you told sir, this is a pulsatile swelling. Sir, the pulsatile swelling is seen in case of flat bone, in case of thyroid, and also in RCC.
Acha, it is not seen in any other situation. These are the only two situations where you see a pulsatile swelling. So you are going for exam, Ajay. 2 months. What are the pulsatile swellings present in the body?
Sir, it could be a vascular, or second from the bony mates are also a pulsatile swelling, sir.
Okay. So how do you approach to make a clinical diagnosis? What are the factors that you are considering to make a diagnosis? In this particular
Further,
case, what are the factors that you have considered to make a diagnosis? You have said it is a metastasis, so there must have been some things other than pulsatile tumor that you have taken into account.
Sir, in the finding, sir, there is a hard pulsatile mass which is attached to the
It is not
iliac bone.
hard. It's a variegated consistency mass. I have got two diagnoses apart from metastasis. Bharat also has said could be metastasis. And other three people have said that it could be soft tissue sarcoma. That is good beginning for a clinical diagnosis. But when we are going for making a diagnosis, you have to keep the key points into consideration. That is what was I asking Ajay, which he couldn't answer. You have to see that she is 74 years. The swelling is present for 10 years. There is a sudden progression in the swelling. So sudden progression in the swelling normally tells you about either a malignant transformation into a benign lesion, or it also tells you presence of a hemorrhage inside the tumor. So sudden progression. Then location is gluteal. Tumor is fixed to the bone. Fixed to the bone means that it is either arising from the bone, or it is most of the time it is arising from the bone, and it is pulsatile. So these are the key things that you have to keep in mind when you are attempting a diagnosis. And it is not possible to give a clinical diagnosis in such a cases, so you always have a differential diagnosis. You always keep more than one diagnosis. And the first diagnosis that would come to your mind will be aneurysmal bone cyst or vascular malformations. You have to remember that it is a 10-year duration, sudden progression, probably a bony swelling and pulsatile. And whenever you are talking of a long duration swellings, you have to understand that most of these should be benign, or at least less malignant, or slow progressive malignant, if they are malignant. Then among the soft tissue tumors, The pulsatility is present in epithelioid hemangioma, angiosarcoma, hemangioendothelioma, and hemangiopericytoma. These are the four tumors which normally present with pulsatile swellings, vascular soft tissue sarcomas. Other sarcomas do not present with pulsatile swellings. So in the soft tissue sarcoma, you will further be limited to angiosarcoma, hemangioendothelioma, hemangiopericytoma, and of course a epithelioid hemangioma. The only thing that will go against a hemangioma is that it is not a soft cystic swelling. So it is variegated consistency swellings. It is soft at places and it is hard at places. So that will go against hemangioma. And then you have obviously pulsatile metastasis, which comes from kidney and thyroid. So with this differential diagnosis, how will you proceed? What investigations are you going to order? Imaging first. So what imaging are you going to do, Ajay?
Sir, MRI with angio. I might first.
Why MRI?
Sir, to know the nature of the swelling and also the vascular status of the swelling. Both we can do.
The swelling and the vascular status. How do you see vascular status in a MRI, and what kind of an MRI that you have to order to see the?
Sir, MRI angio I will do.
So MRI angio, MRI contrast, X-ray followed by MRI. Okay, so most of the people think that X-ray pelvis is also an example. So there are a lot of answers coming. Most of the people think that an MRI should be done. But what was done here was a CT scan pelvis. Now, the advantage, what are the advantage of CT scan over MRI? If you have attended the soft tissue sarcoma class, it was very clearly said.
Sir, can I speak?
Yes, speak.
A CT scan will be able to better delineate the bone anatomy and whether any associated lymph nodal involvement is there, whereas an MRI would help us to delineate the soft tissue and any anomaly therein.
Yes. And as far as the sensitivity and specificity of these in evaluating the soft tissue sarcoma masses is concerned, then both of them are equally good. So the choice basically depends upon the area being choiced, whether you want to look at the bones more better, you want to look at the vascularity, and whether you want to look at the soft tissue component. So basically what this CT scan showed was a lesion, destructive lesion arising from the ileum and part of the sacrum, and with a soft tissue component which is extending into the pelvis as well as outside into the gluteal area. What next?
Biopsy, sir, to cut multi-core.
True-cut biopsy, multi-core. Okay, so first FNAC was done, which shows a vascular hematomatous lesion. And obviously a true-cut biopsy after which was done. The biopsy showed follicular structures containing eosinophil colloid material reminiscent of thyroid parenchyma. Areas were seen which were lined with the follicular cells. So this biopsy suggested if metastasis from well-differentiated follicular thyroid carcinoma. So what are next steps?
Ultrasound of neck and T6 before T6. Yeah.
Any other one? Anyone else who wants to do something different? Thyroid profile, look for thyroid, TFT, metastatic workup, whole body thyroid scan. Ooh. PET scan, Debanjan is saying, Menak is saying RAIU, clinical examination, right. So you have to do all of them, not one. So you have to start with the clinical examination of the neck. Obviously, we expect that you have already done one. But then you again look at the neck. This is the patient, anterior view. No thyroid swelling is seen. She's a very lean and thin patient. And you can see that both sternomastoids are seen very clearly. And there is no lesion seen in the neck in clinical examination. Then come the biochemical investigations. Most of the biochemical investigations were normal except thyroglobulin. Ultrasound of the neck was done, which showed this is the lesion here. The length of the lesion is 1.13 centimeter into 0.9 centimeters, located in the left lobe of the thyroid. So what next are you going to do? There were no notes. Somebody has raised a hand.
Sir, we'll do the PSC panel and make the patient ready for the total thyroidectomy.
Is that the treatment, Ajay? So the diagnosis was follicular carcinoma of the thyroid with iliac metastasis. TNM is T1A and 0M1. And Ajay has said that he'll do a total thyroidectomy. So the treatment actually is total thyroidectomy followed by radioiodine ablation, RIA. So Ajay, your answer is half wrong. You have to understand that it is a metastatic disease. And in a metastatic disease, total thyroidectomy is not the treatment. Treatment is total thyroidectomy followed by radioiodine ablation. The MACIS score of this patient was 9.22. And the expected 20-year survival of this patient is 24%, according to the MACIS criteria. After the thyroidectomy, thyroglobulin staining was done, which was 3 positive and follicular cells. Now, a little bit about differentiated thyroid cancers. The 10-year survival is very high, 80 to 95%, distant metastasis 40%. And even in this patient of 74 years with a iliac metastasis, the survival is as good as 24% for 20 years. Among the metastasis, lung is the commonest site, and bone metastasis is seen in 25% of the cases. However, it depends upon the biology of the disease. In Hurthle cell, the bone metastasis rate is much higher than the papillary carcinoma. And bone metastasis is more frequent in follicular thyroid carcinomas, which can occur up to 28% of the cases. 80% of bone metastases are located in the axial skeleton. If we look at the occult metastasis is basically, the basic definition is unknown primary malignancy that is symptomless, which first manifests itself as metastasis or secondary paraneoplastic phenomena. If that happens, it is called an occult metastasis, like in this case. And up to 1% of these cases who present with metastasis can have a occult disease, or even microcarcinomas can be there. And this occult disease is again more common in follicular than in papillary carcinomas. In a papillary carcinoma, primary presentation is more often seen. In a follicular carcinoma, metastasis presentation is more common because the metastasis rate is high. It is more higher than even in Hurthle cell carcinoma. Up to 1/3 of the patient can present with metastasis at the initial presentation. You have all the options for imaging, starting from the plain X-ray, CT scan, whole body MRI. So nobody was wrong when they answered different answers. The plain X-ray is limited. The lesion has to be more than 1 centimeter for it to be detected, and almost 60 to 70% of the bone absorption has to take place before it can be detected by a plain X-ray. So that is why CT and whole body CT and MRI has much higher sensitivities. But the best investigation is iodine 123 and iodine 131 whole body scan. Now, when the imaging was being asked, somebody wrote, a lot of people answered that radioiodine scan was done. But when you are dealing with a metastatic disease to begin with, doing a radioiodine scanning at that particular time is not going to help or alter your management, because the management is to do the total thyroidectomy and then treat the patient with radioiodine. And before the treatment with radioiodine, the patient will undergo a radioiodine scan to see how many metastases are present. Are there other metastatic sites as well or not? But there is no point of doing it before the surgery because it is not going to alter your surgical plan. It will alter your RIA plan, and it is not going to alter your surgical plan, because the total thyroidectomy has to be done, because patient has the mainstay of treatment is RIA. Okay, Rashmi says CT scan avoided IV contrast if RIA is planned because iodinated contrast IV given can't do RIA before 2 months. Yes, if a thyroid is suspected, it is better to do non-radioiodine contrast CTs. But in most of the time, because the imaging is being done first, and at that particular time, you don't know that you are dealing with the thyroid cancers. Most of the time, with a normal radioiodine contrast, the CTs are done. And by the time the patient goes for RIA, approximately 6 to 8 weeks time does happen, because patient has to undergo surgery first, recover from the surgery, then undergo radioiodine scan, and then only he will be undergoing the radioiodine. I'll be coming to salvage surgery, Suyash. Radioiodine will resolve such a big mass. The size doesn't matter for radioiodine. Then PET is a very good technique nowadays. PET is a good technique in patients where 131 iodine is negative. And there are new PET techniques. Iodine 124 PET is now available, which is supposed to be 100% accurate for detecting the lesion, which is much better than the radioiodine 131. So coming to radioiodine first, the dose is 150 to 200 microcurie. Post-ablation scans are done every 6 to 12 months, and further ablative doses are given until unless all the mets are ablated. Maximum dose during the lifetime is 800 to 1000 millicurie. Follow-up is done with thyroglobulin levels, and basically based on the prognosis, two groups are identified in metastatic disease. Group 1 is the one which are under 45 with less than 3 metastatic lesions. There the intent is curative, and the other is more than 45, more than 3 lesions. And those lesions which are persistent even after radioiodine ablation are most common in this group. If we look at the NCCN guidelines, the last guidelines was modified in 2019. And if it is a CNS metastasis, then it is a neurosurgical resection or EBRT. For a bone metastasis, radioiodine ablation is the first choice. Surgical resection in weight-bearing areas or EBRT is the second choice. And I'll tell you when it is done, when radioiodine ablation fails. Bisphosphonates and denosumab therapy is an option. Embolization of mets. And if they are clinically progressive or symptomatic disease, not amenable to RIA, then livatinib and sorafenib are the two agents which are now considered. For site other than CNS and bone, it is again radioiodine 131 ablation, EBRT, surgical resections, or livatinib and sorafenib. Then there are other new drugs which are now available which can be used. Larotrectinib is there for if the anti-RK fusion gene is positive. Vamurafenib is there, and dabrafenib is there if BRAF 600 mutation is positive. And other drugs which are used are axitinib, everolimus, and pazopanib and sutinib. So there are a lot of options for metastatic tumors currently. This is a very busy, you can go and check. And it basically, surgery is being recommended only if it is a radioiodine refractory tumors. And if they are not surgically resectable also, then the livatinib and sorafenib are being recommended as drugs. Now, what is the role of surgery? Surgery is always an option in metastatic disease. It is done for persistent pain refractory to medical therapy, tumors with poor radioiodine uptake, spinal instability with or without neural compression. And options are excision whenever possible, percutaneous vertebroplasty and kyphoplasty are the options. embolization and radioiodine ablation can be done. Now, there are many prognostic systems which you probably know, and this list is not exclusive. There are other systems also. Each center has its own system, and each system has its own advantage, disadvantage that can be discussed. Aegis AMAs is common, but it is no more used now. MEKIS is the one which is used in most of the cancer centers because it takes surgical clearance into account. And TNM is another one which is used, but unfortunately TNM does not take age or surgery into account. And it is said that the age is the most important prognostic criteria in the size of the tumor, and age is the most important prognostic criteria in this. So any questions before we go to the next case? Saurabh Jain says bone mets do not respond well to RAI. They do respond well, Saurabh, only if the differentiation is good. If they are not differentiated, undifferentiated, poorly differentiated tumors, they will not respond. Can chordoma be considered as differential diagnosis? Based on the CT finding and location, yes, it can be. But what is the difference between chordoma and this is one, there is no pulsality. And second, the chordoma usually present as a pelvic mass, not as a gluteal mass. The mass is most of the time down into the pelvis. Role of neck dissection. Role of neck dissection, basically central compartment neck dissection is done even in R0. Neck dissection in thyroid is a controversy in itself, and usually done when the neck nodes are clinically palpable. However, central node compartmental dissections are usually done with the total thyroidectomy. As you are going to do a total thyroidectomy, you include 6 and 7A into your dissection. Aditya says RIA indicated for such a big lesion. The size of the lesion has nothing to do with the radioiodine uptake. The dose required may be higher, that's all. But as such, there is no size criteria for radioiodine treatment. Aditya says everybody said core biopsy of gluteal swelling, but it is contraindicated as it is a pulsatile swelling. Core biopsy can be done even in a pulsatile swelling. Probably after the imaging. If you don't have an imaging, don't put your needle until unless you have ruled out the vascular malformations and the aneurysmal bone cyst, etc. Till that time, don't do a biopsy. But once you have an imaging and it shows a bony distracted lesion with a soft tissue component, then the biopsy can be done. Clinically, how can we say it arises from bone? Should there be some bony irregularity? Tumors arising from bone is its clinical examination. It is very difficult to say whether it is a soft tissue tumor going to the bone or a bone tumor coming out to the soft tissue. The only thing that you clinically find is fixity to the bone. So when you have a tumor which is not movable from the bone, you assume that either it is a soft tissue tumor which has infiltrated the bone, or it is a bone tumor which has come out into the soft tissue. Mainak is asking what is the max dose. Max dose is 800 to 1000. It is done in incremental dose of 150 every 6 months till the ablation is received. Ravi says even choriocarcinoma can present with pulsatile or hemorrhagic mets. Yes, choriocarcinoma can present with pulsatile or hemorrhagic met, but the more common presentation of choriocarcinoma is?
Sir, a choriocarcinoma may present with abortion.
It can present with an abortion. See,
Yeah.
first thing is that it has to be a reproductive age group. You are not going to make a diagnosis of choriocarcinoma in 74 years.
Yeah.
Is it? Isn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely, sir.
Second, there has to be a history of what happens to menstruation in choriocarcinoma. Choriocarcinoma is like pregnancy.
Yeah,
so amenorrhea
will be there.
Amenorrhea will be there.
Yeah,
so amenorrhea will be there.
Yes, sir.
So those are the two things. That's why it has not been discussed here, because we were discussing this particular case. So choriocarcinoma can have a pulsatile met, but the choriocarcinoma, the clinical presentation is going to be amenorrhea, bleeding per vaginum, which is abortion, and the age will be the reproductive age group. So that is why the choriocarcinoma will not come as a differential diagnosis here.
Sir, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Management of the residual lesions. So suppose this lesion does not respond completely to RAI therapy, then what should be the treatment in that case?
I had just presented the NCCN guideline, which says that if it is not being inhibited by radioiodine, surgical option is there, and then you have lenvatinib or sorafenib as an option. And there are a number of other drugs which can be used.
So can radiation be an option for such patients?
External beam radiation is always an option. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
External beam radiation is also an option.
Depending on the location, it would be a very morbid surgery, supposing the lesion does not respond. That is why I asked.
Iliac bone lesions usually can be very safely excised. So that doesn't produce much of a morbidity. Had the lesion been a little higher up, it would have produced much more morbidity. So now most of the orthopedic surgeons, the total hip replacements and hip replacements are being done with, even with the iliac bone, they are replacing the hip joint. So it can be done, and there is no muscle involvement, then it is possible. But then all the options are there. The external beam radiation option is there. The drug option is there. You have all the options that you can go to.
Thank you, sir.
So this patient is a young woman, 18 years. She's unmarried. And she presented with a progressive distension of abdomen, pain abdomen, which was vague aching pain, lower abdomen in both flanks and no radiation, and swelling in the left gluteal region for 10 months duration. She has a history of appendectomy 4 years back, and she has a normal menstrual history. On examination, the abdomen was distended, umbilicus central and everted. 6 centimeter oblique scar is seen in right iliac fossa, which is appendectomy scar. Abdomen is non-tender, and there is a diffuse mass which is felt all over the abdomen. Lower end is not palpable, which is firm in consistency. No fluid thrill or shifting dullness, and no hepatosplenomegaly. So it was virtually a diffuse mass which was occupying the whole of the abdomen and pelvis. The percussion note was dull all over the abdomen. Bowel sounds were normally felt peripherally. And a 10 into 8 centimeter Bogey swelling was seen in the upper posterior medial aspect of left thigh gluteal region, which was cross-fluctuant with abdominal swelling, and cuff impulse was positive. DRE showed fullness posteriorly and to the left side. This is the picture of the gluteal swelling. So now anybody wants to attempt a clinical diagnosis. Abdominal swelling with the gluteal swelling, gluteal perineal swelling, and cross-fluctuant cuff impulse present. Retroperitoneal sarcoma, yes. Pseudomyxoma herniation, yes. So we have got 2 diagnoses here: pseudomyxoma and retroperitoneal tumor. Both of them are equally good diagnosis. Pseudomyxoma diagnosis comes because there is a history of appendectomy, and retroperitoneal sarcoma with herniation is second diagnosis. What would be the differential diagnosis? Can there be other differentials other than these 2 diagnoses? There could be a large ovarian cyst which can herniate. And cystic ascites is another condition where there will be similar pictures. And leiomyoma with uterine herniation is another situation which can present as an abdominal mass with gluteal or perineal mass. What investigations? there is a diagnosis of ileopsoas sepsis. Ileopsoas sepsis will have constitutional symptoms like fever, pain, and the characteristic feature of ileopsoas sepsis is, what is the physical finding in ileopsoas sepsis? What happens if the psoas gets irritated?
Flexion of the hip joint, sir.
Flexion of the hip joint. Flexion of the hip joint or inability to extend the hip joint. Yes, flexion and rotation. That's right. Srijan is right. So the investigations are done. X-ray chest was normal. ELISA for TB was done. I don't know why it was done, but patient had the report. Ultrasound was done, which shows a large 30 into 18 into 16 centimeter complex cystic mass occupying whole abdomen and pelvis with internal septations and echos displacing bowel loops posteriorly with mild right-sided hydronephrosis. CT, unfortunately, is very poor. I tried to take the picture and the picture went out of focus. But you can see that there is a large tumor with partly necrotic material inside, involving the whole of the abdomen, pushing the bowel loops to one side. And the tumor is occupying the whole of the pelvis. And it is herniating through the left-sided musculature in the perineal region, this area. And rectum, if you can see, rectum is pushed to the right side. This contrast, you see, this speck of contrast is the rectum. But unfortunately, the picture here is very poor. This is an old case. I tried to take pictures. And this is the picture taken at the level of the upper part of femur bone. And you can see the extension of the tumor through the perineum into the perineum through the perineal musculature. So this was displacing all the organs, was not involving any organ. Rectum was displaced. The ovary and bladder were displaced. The fat plane between the mass lesion and pelvic musculature and abdominal wall muscles were intact. Would you like to take a biopsy? Ajay? Simple question, Ajay. Yes or no?
Yes, sir. Let's do biopsy. Yes, sir. Biopsy.
You'll do a biopsy. Most of the people says do a biopsy, except Mani says that he doesn't require a biopsy. Biopsy is required, though the radiological feature on CT scan shows that it is a well demarcated swelling with intact planes all around from top to bottom. So a true cut biopsy was taken here. It was around 2 spindle sept shales in a loose of fibrous stroma with fair number of intervening vessels, suggestive of spindle cell tumor. Occasional mitosis were present. So what is next? Ajay, would you do surgery or would you do something else?
Sir, I want to do ISC marker.
You want to do ISC marker? Are they going to change your management?
Sir, if it is suppose sir biopsy come as a liposarcoma, then we directly go for the surgery. If it is something something else, substitutes, then we can go for pre-op RT.
So Ajay, what are the spindle cell tumors with fibrous stroma and occasional mitosis? Can you name a few?
Rhabdomyosarcoma, spindle cell.
Wrong. See, occasional mitosis means it's a benign tumor. What does occasional mitosis indicate? Occasional mitosis indicate that it is a benign tumor. So you are still thinking of liposarcoma and rhabdomyosarcoma. A lot of people are saying fibrosarcoma, synovial sarcoma. No. Fibroma, yes, it can be a fibroma. But most of the time it is a benign tumor because there is occasional mitosis. And the only option you have here is a surgery. You don't have any new adjuvant treatment option here. And you can do an ISC, yes. We did an ISC, but I'm not telling you right now. But ISC is not going to alter your management at this point of time. And in fact, Mani has said earlier that he does not even require a biopsy, to which I don't agree, because if my biopsy shows me a benign tumor, my approach is different. If my biopsy shows a malignant tumor, my approach would have been different. I might have used neoadjuvant if it was a malignant tumor. So biopsy is essential to let you know whether it is benign or malignant. And obviously surgery was done. This was a bilobe tumor, retroperitoneal, 15 kgs. The abdominal was 60 into 40 centimeters, and the perineal part was 25 into 20 centimeters, adherent to parietal wall. Rectum was displaced anteriorly and right. All the organs were free, and tumor was extending into thigh through left orbit obturator foramina and the perineum. Surgically, the tumor was going through the obturator foramina and through the perineum. So it was an obturator hernia plus a perineal hernia. Both the hernias were there. Ajay, how many types of pelvic hernias are there other than obturator and perineal?
Where, sir?
Pelvic hernias. Pelvic hernias. Pelvic hernias are primarily 4 types. The commonest is the perineal hernia. The second commonest is the sciatic hernia. Then you have obturator hernia, and then you have, what is left? Sciatic, obturator, and gluteal hernia through the gluteal musculature. So pelvic hernias are basically classified as 4 types of hernias, depending upon through which they herniate. So this has dual herniation from the obturator as well as the perineal hernias. Urinary bladder was adherent to the mass and was displaced anteriorly. Uterus and fallopian tube were normal, and tumor was adherent to rectovaginal septum and vaginal wall posteriorly. So can you name the tumors which arise from the vaginal septum? Okay, this is the tumor. This was excised completely. And the histopathology was angiofibromyxoma. So this is basically a rare tumor which has capillary and cavernous vascular spaces stuffed with blood and separated by edematous, fibrous and myxomatous tissue. The fibrous tissue is in form of interlacing or parallel bundle of collagen with edema. The myxomatous tissue comprises of satellite cells with fibrillary and mucinous tumors. So primarily it looks like a spindle cell, and very rarely you will see a metastasis or no metastasis at times. Now, this is something which is reported first in 1983. It is seen in reproductive age females, and females are 6 times more than males. It has predilection for pelvic soft parts. It usually arises from vagina, vulva, or more rarely from buttocks, retroperitoneum, and the inguinal region. But the vaginal ones are very rare. We have seen only 2 cases of vaginal angiomyxoma till date. In the males, it arises from scrotum and spermatic cord, groin, pelvis, and perineum. It's a slow-growing tumor, focally infiltrative, lacking a capsule, locally invasive, and tends to infiltrate deep into pelvic soft tissues. CT shows well-defined margin and an attenuation that is less than of a muscle. Now the immunochemistry which Ajay was asking. The tumors are positive for vimentin. It has variable positivity for muscle-specific actin and smooth muscle actin. They are positive for desmin, and they are negative for myosin, CD34, factor 8 related antigen, alpha-1 antitrypsin, alpha-1 antichymotrypsin, S100 proteins, and neuron-specific enolase, and chromogranin. And many of these tumors express estrogen and progesterone receptors. So they can be positive or they can be negative. Treatment is surgical excision. There is no role of adjuvant radiation and chemo. Local recurrence rates are low. Distant metastasis is not reported. And vaginal angiofibromyxoma, only 19 cases are reported in world literature. And we have seen only 2 cases in my 30 years practice. till date. One with a herniation, one without herniation. How was the thigh component delivered? Srijan, the thigh component was delivered through a perineal incision. The origin was vagina. Post of chemotherapy is not required as this is a benign tumor. Chemotherapy will not respond. Bharat says sciatic upper and lower. Yes. Suprapiriformis, I think it is called, or infrapiriformis. Yes. Mainak is saying, what happened to bladder invasion? It was adhered to bladder, Mainak. It is not invading the bladder. Adhesion is not same as invasion. Nilesh says these tumors tend to recur. Yes, these tumors tend to recur. But if the recurrence occurs, then recurrence chances are not high. There are only 19 cases reported. None of the cases has reported a recurrence till date. And as it is a benign tumor, there is no role of radiation and chemotherapy. Please, everybody. There is no role of chemotherapy for benign tumors. And no role of chemotherapy or radiotherapy. Had it been malignant, Akash is asking. This was discussed in the soft tissue sarcoma case presentations, retroperitoneal soft tissue sarcoma. And Akash, I'll encourage you to go to the YouTube channel Surgical Oncology and see the soft tissue sarcoma discussion video, and you will find answer to your question. I'll repeat it again. In a retroperitoneal sarcomas, borderline operability, it is neoadjuvant radiotherapy followed by surgery. Any measures for pelvic floor rehabilitation required? Yes, you have to repair the hernia, whatever it is. So hernia repair is required, and if the defect is bigger, you may have to place a mesh in the pelvic floor. Otherwise, the uterine descent occurs, and patient may have problems in during the pregnancy in future. Adjuvant tamoxifen, Atul is asking. Atul, I don't know because in the literature nobody has used, but if a tumor which is ER positive, the tamoxifen can always be given. But in a woman of a childbearing age who has to get married and produce children, we usually do not advise tamoxifen. So even if tamoxifen is given, it is an off-label indication and can be given only as a clinical trial because it is not required. Any margin required? The margin is the pseudocapsule on the tumor in soft tissue. And this margin question was again discussed when we discussed the soft tissue sarcoma presentation, that the margin has to be negative. So nowadays we are not talking of 1 centimeter or a 5 centimeter margin. We are talking of negative margin. And it is usually recommended that tumor with the pseudocapsule has to be removed. Any role of pre-op embolization? Why? It is usually a benign tumor, does not have it's not a very vascular tumor. It will usually, you will find only 1 or 2 vessels coming from either the ovarian or the ascending vaginal branches. So somebody is asking, fibromatosis, tamoxifen is indicated. In fibromatosis also, there is no FDA approved indication of tamoxifen. So let me repeat. When you, in practice, people use tamoxifen in fibromatosis, but it is not an FDA approved indication. Tamoxifen is approved only for the treatment of breast cancer, ER positive breast cancer by FDA. All other indications are labeled as off-label indications. And if a side effect occurs and the patient goes to the court, files a suit against you, you are liable to be prosecuted for off-label indications. One of the interesting cases of off-label use was use of bevacizumab in eye. And I know 5 doctors were actually indicted and were prosecuted for using bevacizumab in the eye. Saurabh Jain says could have been desmoid tumor. Saurabh, desmoid tumor is very hard If you feel a desmoid tumor and if you feel a angiofibromyxoma or myxomatous tumors, their feel is different. Myxomatous tumors are bogey tumors. They are not hard. And most of the time, the desmoid tumors are very hard, solid tumors. So Yash says even GIST can have low mitotic count. Yes, GIST can also have a zero mitotic count. It is called benign GIST. So if there are no other questions, I thank everybody for participation.